Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today more than ever before, companies, brands, and their partners need to stand for something beyond the bottom line. I've created this program to provide insights and ideas to share with you so that you can apply them to your work the very next day. The goal here is to up-level your purpose and to benefit companies and society. So please join us. I'm so excited about my conversation with Megan Wheeler today, who leads Google.org's incredible giving back efforts at the company, because she's going to share amazing insights to not only what they did, but how do you embed volunteerism and giving back deeply into a culture of young people, technologists all around the world that you would say, they're really not into giving and really caring. That's not the truth at Google. The kind of insights that Megan is going to share, if you're a global company, you must localize opportunities. 2, leadership buy-in. Don't just have their name in a press release. They need to role model behaviors, from actually volunteering shoulder to shoulder with all sorts of different levels of colleagues to matching donations and making sure people know of your commitments. The 3rd insight is being proactive in terms of giving back, but then add the power of and. And you know, we talk a lot about the power of and in our podcast. It's not either or, it's and. And the power of being agile to react to crises quickly. And Google does all that. And you're going to learn about that in our conversation. There's a lot in this episode. So join me and let's hear about our conversation about the goodness with inside Google. So I always like to start out with you, Megan. So tell us a bit about your journey to Google. How did you get there? How long have you been there?
Great. Well, first, I just want to say thank you, Carol. It is so nice to be here, and I'm really excited to tell you a little bit about me and about the programs that we run at Google.org and all of the different ways that we engage Googlers in our program. I'd say for my journey in particular, although I didn't know it at the time, the beginning of my journey to Google probably started in college. So I was a kinesiology major and had plans to enter the world of sports marketing and PR after college. But that all changed when I took a social justice course at the end of my sophomore year. The course was rooted in economics and just and frankly unjust labor practices, and ignited a strong desire to continue learning more about these social issues. And giving had always been sort of a core part of my life growing up, but something really shifted in me after I took that course. And I realized I could dedicate more of my time and focus around core social issues that really mattered. So I continued taking a few more social justice courses and came to the conclusion that even though I love sports, I wanted to find a job with a more meaningful purpose, something that impacted people and communities who needed it most.
How did you get to Google?
I started a little nonprofit on the side with a friend of mine, selling fair trade products from developing countries, and got a job right out of college with a nonprofit legal organization coordinating their volunteer programs and their volunteer clinics. I loved the work that I was doing, found so much purpose in my day-to-day, and wasn't at all expecting it when a recruiter from Google reached out to me with a temporary position to join Google as a recruiting coordinator. So I was still pretty early in my career and was very intrigued by this 1-year opportunity. I thought, this seems like a once in a lifetime opportunity to work for a company like Google, I can work there for a year, diversify my resume a little bit, and then come back to the nonprofit sector with a deeper set of, skills and knowledge that I could apply to that work. Fast forward to 10 years later.
Okay, great.
What I thought would just be a 1-year sidestep has really turned into so much more. And while I did not start out on the Google.org team right away, one of my earliest sentiments about the company was how Google offered so many opportunities for employees to get involved with passion projects outside of their core role. So I knew pretty early on that being a recruiting coordinator wasn't the job for me, but realized that Google had so many ways that I could contribute to the community and really set my sights on getting involved with more and more of those opportunities. And so within a year, actually, of joining the company, I was working in what we call a 20% capacity, volunteering my time with the team that ran our annual Google Serve campaign. And in 2016, I officially joined Google.org to lead our global giving and volunteering campaigns.
So this is a really important coaching point for our listeners who may be in the middle of their careers. They may not be just starting out. And that you found a great organization that supported its employees. It allowed you to keep your eyes on the prize in terms of your personal passion. And you worked the system in a really good way.
I even work with a handful of the organizations that I worked with at the legal nonprofit. And so I really feel like I've come full circle in so many ways. I find purpose not only in the work that's giving back to the community, but also in the opportunities to help Googlers find their philanthropic purpose. So yeah, I think there are always those sorts of opportunities when you really look for it. But I feel really fortunate to be at a place like Google that really sort of encourages that sentiment in its employees.
What are 2 or 3 insights that you can say, you're meeting a colleague at a conference or such, but now you're meeting them over the podcast. What can you share with them to help them advance the work they're doing with their colleagues?
Really localizing opportunities, especially important for global companies, right? So if you're trying to engage Googlers or employees, I should say, around the world, being able to localize it and scale those programs in a way that really resonates with a local market, I think is truly important. And I'd say one of the most important elements to incorporate in your giving and volunteering programs. I think the other thing is leadership buy-in. We talked about this a little bit too, but having the support, being able to send company-wide communications, and having your leaders say, hey, I'm going to go out and volunteer and I invite all of you to come with me, or I'm personally matching donations to this campaign and I hope you'll join me. That really goes a long way. And I think one of the most inspiring parts about our programs is that we really have the support across the company from our leaders. And I'd say probably the third and final piece, that's a little bit more practical maybe, is just being willing and ready to react to situations that are going on. And, I think a lot of the campaigns that I talked about are, proactive. We spend months and months planning and launching our global moments, but a lot of the other campaigns that I shared were very reactive and very like, oh my gosh, we're in a crisis and there's a community that needs our help and we need to really move fast and respond and engage our Googlers in a way that we can bring them alongside the work that we're doing. And so I would say being flexible and willing to react to all of the various things that come our way is another really important part of these programs. 3
terrific insights. So now how does Google.org mobilize Googlers, I love to say that, Googlers, to apply their time, their talents, and their passions to causes important to them personally, to the company, and to society? So how does it work?
Google.org was founded in 2005 and is Google's philanthropic and charitable arm. So we were established when Google went public with a commitment of 1% of its equity and an ongoing commitment of 1% of its net profit for charity. And Googler giving and volunteering is a huge part of our approach. So each year, Google volunteers spend more than 200,000 hours with nonprofits, bringing their passion, their engineering expertise to, again, really accelerate the progress that these organizations are having. And in addition to short-term volunteer engagements, the Google.org Fellowship is a pro bono program that we offer that actually matches Googlers with our Google.org grantees for up to 6 months of full-time technical projects. So Googlers are basically taking, 6 months to dedicate their full time to helping these organizations, solve really challenging problems and really work as a team with these orgs that we're funding to ensure that the work has a sustained and lasting impact.
So these 6-month kind of sabbaticals must be in really high demand. And so first of all, what's the criteria that your colleagues have to be able to say, raise their hand, hey, I'd love to be considered for this. So how long do they have to be there? What positions? How do they pick?
Not every fellowship looks and works the same, right? So it kind of is on a case-by-case basis. And really, we're following sort of the lead of the organizations that we're working with, our grantees, to really say, who do you need? What type of issue and problem are you trying to solve? And then from there, we have a really robust database of Googlers who have expressed an interest and said, I would be interested in lending this specific skill set, or I have an expertise in this area and can help out at some point in my career. And so using that database, we then recruit for the specific Googler volunteers to find exactly the right type of person that the organization needs. And then, of course, that person needs to be at the right time in their career to be able to make that pivot, work with their manager to figure out, what makes the most sense. I'd say it's more of an art than a science, let's say, but we think it really is the most unique value that we can add to the funding that we're giving to these organizations to say, we're giving you a Googler who really has a deep expertise in this area and can help you do so much more with that funding.
Okay, so you've got 6 months that you get to go. How many fellowships do you have on an annual basis?
On an annual basis, we have anywhere from 50 to 100 Googlers that are engaging in these types of fellowships. Some of them are 6 months, some of them are a little bit shorter, some are longer, again, depending on what the organization needs. But we typically see around 50 to 100 or so employees participating in those programs at any time.
Are these overseas? Are they in their hometown, or do they travel? And then how do you support them? Are they getting full salary? They getting, their air, their whatever, their, hostel, or they might be living in a hut?
Typically, we would match part of the criteria, if you will, that we would use would be to match local Googlers to their local, grantee that's looking for the support. And so Google is a global company. We have grantees all over the world. If we're working with a nonprofit in Los Angeles, we'll try to recruit Googlers that are based in the Los Angeles area. But I will say, during COVID, a lot of that has changed and become a lot more fluid, right? Because everything is happening virtually now. And so that certainly, I think, opened up a lot of opportunities for folks as well, just being able to, not be constrained to their local market, for example, and being able to work with nonprofits in a global capacity. One project that I'm pretty proud of in particular is the work that Googlers have done with the Trevor Project. It's actually been an ongoing relationship that we've had with the Trevor Project over the past several years, and have had Googlers at various stages in their career pop in and work with Trevor in various capacities, using, in most cases, their engineering expertise and using AI to help accelerate the work that the Trevor Project is doing.
The Trevor Project is really it's becoming really, really high profile now.
They provide support to the LGBTQ community through a U.S. national 24-hour hotline that individuals can call at any moment to get free, confidential, life-saving, honestly, support. The support that the Trevor Project provides is just critical and really, again, is life-saving in a lot of ways. And so being able to have Googlers lend their time and expertise in a way that can further accelerate the work that Trevor is doing, help them automate their systems in more meaningful ways, is really powerful. And I'd say even on the scaled side of things, so we've, in my world, we've worked with the Trevor Project for Googlers that, let's say, don't have the opportunity to spend 3 to 6 months working full time with the Trevor Project. We offer, short-term engagements where Googlers can sign up for a crisis counselor shift, for example, and they can, volunteer maybe one time, or maybe someone that has, more time can do it on an ongoing basis for a few weeks. But really providing sort of that range of scale and support to organizations is something that I think we do best, and being able to work with our Googlers across the board, depending on, again, their expertise and the time that they have to find the opportunity that's the most meaningful for them.
So Google has how many hundreds of thousands of employees now?
We are almost at 150,000 employees.
And in how many countries? Do you know that number?
Over 90 countries.
I am sure that so many of your colleagues want to get engaged, whether it's, once a week, once a month, 6 months or such. A lot of our listeners are large companies, from large companies, and they're going like, okay, I want to know the secret sauce from Google. So Megan, we're going to put you on the hot spot and just say, okay, scaling, we're always talking about scaling. So how do you get your colleagues involved? What's involved in the scaling of these initiatives?
I mentioned Google Serve is one of the campaigns that I oversee and run. And it's really our largest employee giving initiative. It's a month-long campaign that typically in pre-pandemic times engages over 25,000 employees during the month of June. This year marks our 13th annual campaign, which admittedly looks a lot different this year than in previous years. It's running almost completely virtually for this month and into July. And Googlers are encouraged to volunteer with an organization now with the hope that, again, it'll springboard into an ongoing sort of sentiment of service, and that Googlers volunteer even beyond the campaign, that just takes place during a month or two. And right now, the ways that Googlers are participating and volunteering, they've gotten so creative over the past 2 years in this remote sort of world that we're living in, from providing mentoring to SMBs and job seekers, to helping students and teachers who were in need of, distance learning support and tools, even doing things recently like making phone calls to confirm folks' COVID-19 vaccine appointments. It's been a really great way for Googlers to give back. And in terms of the scale and how do we do it? How do we scale it? So I mentioned earlier that one of the ways that I first got involved with this work at Google was in what we call a 20% capacity. So that's where Googlers can effectively spend 20% of their work time working on projects outside of their core role. So Google's Gmail project was actually an idea that 2 engineers worked on in a 20% capacity. So just sharing that as an example, it's a really great way for employees to work on things that they're really passionate about outside of their day job. And it would be impossible for me to run giving and volunteering programs for Googlers, 150,000 Googlers as just one person. So I luckily have an army of about 150 20%ers who dedicate their time to support and run our campaigns on the ground in their local office. So that also provides an opportunity for different offices and different teams to participate in our programs in a way that resonates most with them. What volunteering looks like in London might look different than volunteers engaging in Singapore, for example. And so, I provide the global infrastructure that these folks can plug into, and then they can take that and get creative and really, run things in a way, again, that the Googlers in their local market will really respond to and therefore want to get involved with.
Yeah, very customized, very local. So you allow the markets and the individuals to really pick local not-for-profits that interest them.
Absolutely.
And so that really, it feeds into their passion. Mm-hmm. How many people full-time do you have on your team? Just curious.
It's just me.
It's just you. Okay, so the 20% is interesting because I haven't heard of that before. I've heard at 3M. So 3M has, I think it's 15% of people's times they are expected to work on innovative ideas. So do you know when the 20% of time outside your core, when that was instituted? I'm just curious about that.
Gosh, I think it goes back pretty early on. It was a part of the company's kind of culture, really. And like I mentioned, so Google's Gmail project, at the time, at least the story as I've heard it, is that, two engineers had this really great idea to create an email server. And at the time, Google was we were a search company and didn't think that, having an email product made a lot of sense. But those two engineers, their managers said, hey, if you want to go and build this, as a 20% project, so you can imagine Fridays, for example, all day Friday would be spent, building out this other side project. And out of that opportunity, Gmail was born. And, Gmail is obviously one of our most beloved products at this point now. And so it really has been a part of the company's culture for as long as I can remember. And I think is a great way for employees just to get to work on, again, like what they're passionate about and find purpose in something that might not be at all connected to their day job.
And it really keeps people engaged and it keeps them creative and energized. You also do have some focus areas. I know that you've got the challenges that you run.
Yeah. And just to clarify, you're referring to the Global Impact Challenge. So it's a really unique opportunity for us to actually get the public involved in helping to direct some of our grant funding. In most instances, we'll say, okay, let's take the Bay Area. We're going to open an open call for funding and encourage, anyone to submit an idea that they have for funding. It could be an existing nonprofit that wants to build and scale out, the work that they're doing, or it could be, an organization that doesn't yet exist and someone that has a great idea for, gosh, if I could get X amount of funding for this, I could really, solve a big challenging issue. That is sort of the structure of how our Impact Challenge works. We crowdsource, have an open call for funding, for applications, and then oftentimes receive hundreds of thousands of applications and have a very, intense process of reviewing applications and narrow it down ultimately to 10 to 20 or so finalists. We bring in a panel of local experts and judges that ultimately help make the final reviews. We open it up to public as well, so the public can vote on their favorite ideas, and it's a really, I think, unique way for us to distribute our funding. And we actually just announced, you might know this, Carol, but we just announced our most recent Global Impact Challenge, our Women and Girls Challenge, which is global. So it is not tied to one specific local market. And we're essentially committing $25 million to fund organizations that are creating pathways for women and girls. It's an open call again for applications, and the finalists, the organizations that are selected, will receive up to $2 million in funding, and will continue to provide some of this additional support, like the things that we focus on my team, adding Googlers, for example, to lend their time and skills to these organizations to help them, really leverage the funding in the best way possible.
So how do you pick? I mean, for the most current one, you probably had, thousands of great ideas. How do you pick them?
We just finished reviewing some of the early applications, and I was actually fortunate enough to work with my colleagues on reviewing a subset of the applications. And like you said, there are hundreds of thousands and so many amazing, unique ideas, really. And so we go through several stages of application review. So starting out with, folks on my team, with other, nonprofit experts and panels that are also reviewing the applications, and, try to have as much of a data-driven approach as possible. And so really looking for the applications that call out specifically, like what the tangible impact that their funding will then allow them to do or to scale as an organization. And so we use that lens to really ultimately narrow it down before we open it up to the public and others to share their input with us.
Do you have a policy of XX paid time off for volunteering? Do you have that as well to the 20%?
We do, yeah. So the 20% project is separate. And that's something that, Googlers would have to work with their manager to figure out if it makes sense, if they're allowed. But every single Googler gets 20 hours of paid work time to volunteer during the workday. So again, they can split that up in any sort of way that they want. And Googlers are encouraged to volunteer, by the way, beyond those 20 hours. But that 20 hours can actually be spent as, paid work time to go and volunteer with nonprofits.
I know you've got an employee match.
We do.
For giving.
Yes.
What's your match amount?
Our match amount, we recently raised it actually at the start of the pandemic. We increased every Googler's matching limit from $7,500 per person to $10,000 per employee.
That's way up there.
Yeah.
Because I know the guys at Microsoft. I think they're not 15,000, but I think the fact that you raised it from 75 is very generous too, and to 10,000 is even better. So let's do a pivot. Let's talk about the pandemic, because obviously you had a major role to play around the world with a lot of information and quick updates as well. You were very, very, very generous in terms of your COVID support.
Unfortunately, there really, from my perspective, were sort of two moments where we really had to activate and respond quickly, frankly, and engage our Googlers in meaningful ways. One was, at the start of the pandemic last year, but then more recently, a few months ago, we really had to respond really quickly again to everything that was happening in India and figure out, again, ways that Google.org obviously is providing funding and giving relief to communities that need it most. But how do we, as a Googler engagement team, how do we effectively bring our Googlers alongside that in a meaningful way? One thing that we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic was just Googlers, I think, across the board having this overwhelming sense of like, I want to help. How can I help? And people struggling with, individually trying to sort of wrap their minds around what the pandemic means for them as individuals and how that's sort of changing their day-to-day and their routines, but then also recognizing that we're so fortunate as Google employees in so many ways. And so wanting to really, use that to give back and really help the communities that were needing it most. And so at the start of COVID, we launched an internal site to provide recommendations for Googlers who are looking for ways to help the community. So Google.org committed $10.5 million through public matching campaigns, specifically with the WHO, through the UN Foundation and the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. And we also created internal giving campaigns for those organizations as well to encourage Googlers to donate their personal dollars and get those personal dollars matched by the company there. I mentioned that, we increased our gift match limit to just really help encourage sort of and foster this sense of generosity amongst Googlers. And actually one project that I'm particularly proud of that I got to work on at the beginning of COVID last year. In the US, we launched a campaign with nonprofit Give Directly. Give Directly is a nonprofit that distributes cash transfers to individuals and families around the world. And there's been a lot of research that shows that direct cash transfers are one of the most effective ways to give relief. And we basically created a campaign. We localized it in 13 different U.S. cities and called on Googlers in each of those offices to help us raise funds in addition to the grant funding that we were providing. Give Directly also opened up those campaigns to the public for folks that wanted to donate as well. And collectively, we helped raise over $20 million. So that supported over 20,000 families in the U.S. that really needed it most.
You also used your resources, and I think it's really important for our listeners. It's not just cash, and you had $250 million in ad grants to connect people, and I love this, to accurate vaccine information. Because and I'm glad to see that you are supporting accuracy in information, where the tech business has been actually given some black marks about accuracy and information. The other thing I loved that you did is you donated $250 million in grants to fund pop-up vaccination sites in Black, Latino, and rural communities, which is absolutely critical. And it's not actually your core. I'm just curious about where that came from.
I mean, that's one of the things that I think makes Google.org really unique is that we really think that we're at our best when we can bring together all of the elements that Google special. So that's our money, our products, and our people. And so we oftentimes, especially in moments of crisis, we will partner with other teams to work on initiatives that we think are really critical. And so a few of my colleagues on Google.org work really closely with Google's health and science teams on a lot of these efforts, particularly related to vaccines. And actually, it's yet another example of something that I'm proud of for bringing Googlers alongside our vaccine work. We're always sort of looking like, what's the unique angle? How can we get Googlers involved in this as well? And we created an internal giving campaign. We worked with our nonprofit partner, Gavi, and both Gavi, they're the Vaccine Alliance. It's doing they're in the forefront of leading a lot of the vaccine distribution around the world. Both Gavi and Google.org committed to matching donations that Googlers made. Within just a few weeks, we collectively raised $10 million, which helped fully vaccinate 1 million people in low and middle income countries, in places where, the access to vaccine distribution is really tough. So I think just another example, just sharing how, holistically, I think we're really trying to look for the ways that Google is really uniquely poised to help the communities that need it the most.
Truly, walking the talk in terms of its social contract. Talk a little bit about India. When the virus just absolutely flared up there, you did a lot.
I think from a personal perspective, I felt, so much conflict because, on one hand, I think I had just gotten, my first COVID vaccine, and was starting to feel, a little sense of a relief, thinking like, okay, we're turning a corner on this pandemic, and yet there's just so much devastation that's still happening, and seeing the spikes in India and in Latin America as well was truly heartbreaking. And so we announced in April additional grants in India supporting local communities there in a total of $18 million. And a lot of that was really focused on expanding the reach of public health information and just supporting the ongoing relief work there. But again, another key piece of that was our Googlers. And we have several large offices in India, and so many Googlers who, both in India and across the world, were just heartbroken and really looking for ways to help. And so we launched a giving campaign. And I feel like if there's any one key takeaway from this conversation, it should be that Googlers are so generous. And within a few weeks, we had raised over $5 million for those communities in India. And again, that's not our grant funding, that's Googler personal donations, and then our company's gift match. And again, it really serves as an outlet for people who are otherwise feeling helpless. Like, I want to help, I don't know what I can do. I'm experiencing the pandemic too. How can I help? And so providing those easy, tangible ways to give back that are incredibly powerful for the communities that need it most.
Why do you think, I'm just curious about, the tech industry gets this bad rap. You've got these young masters of the universe, they're all engineers, they want to make all this money young and then retire and do something else. That doesn't sound like Googlers at all. And I'm just curious in terms of, there seems to be this incredible ethos in terms of the people you're recruiting.
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate. I get to work with, like I said, some of the most inspiring and truly generous people all around the world. Whether that's through, our 20%ers who are helping to run a lot of these programs, or just, the Googlers that are giving back with their time and their dollars. And from my perspective, Google, from really early on, sort of fostered a culture of giving back. And frankly, a lot of these programs that I run now were started as grassroots efforts when the company was a lot smaller than it is now. So, our Google Serve campaign, for example, was started by my friend and former colleague, Seth Marbin, back when there were only a few thousand Googlers in the Bay Area. And at the time, it was just organized as a single day of service. And again, was extremely grassroots. But as the company has grown and evolved over time, we've sort of kept the sentiments of a lot of these campaigns. We've obviously streamlined them and made them easier for folks to engage at a scalable way. But I think a lot of the culture of giving back and volunteering was really deeply embedded in Google's culture from the get-go. And I'm really proud of the way that we've continued to really maintain and foster a sense of community and giving back now that our company is, almost 150,000 people. It's incredible.
It is incredible. Let's talk about another area that you seem to instantly respond to and scale, and that's racial justice.
Yeah, last year was I think, challenging year for folks in more ways than one. And I think what happened last year with George Floyd's murder and specifically the violence against the Black community is certainly not something new and not something that was new for our Black colleagues as well. But I think a moment in time last year that forced everyone collectively to reckon with, frankly, the ongoing structures of systemic racism and figure out ways to respond and to do better. And again, just speaking to the generosity of Googlers and the incredible work that we were able to do, just rallying folks who were looking for ways to help. We actually ran our largest internal giving campaign ever. That's both by number of people who participated and also the total dollars raised. We raised over $12 million to support the Black community and saw the most ever contributors to a single giving opportunity. And so I think, again, it speaks both to the generosity of Googlers, but also to the moment in time and to what an important sort of reckoning and acknowledgement it was for folks around the company and frankly around the world.
You're doing so many campaigns and initiatives and opportunities, from the 20% to the matching to all sorts of things employees can do. How does the word get out? Is it just a constant flow of information, or do you have some secrets to your communications vehicles? Because I think that you've got a culture that, this is a fertile culture. Got it. But I think a lot of companies are going, yeah, we're doing a lot, but it's hard to get out and get our messages. The sales messages are more important and the product messages. How do you do it?
Probably one of the most tactical pieces for our work and frankly for any type of scalable employee giving and volunteering initiatives is through internal communications. Especially with working remotely, the main way to encourage people to get involved now is, the only way really to encourage people to get involved or to spread the word is through internal messaging channels. And we're really lucky that, one, our leadership really values giving back and allows Google.org to do things like send a company-wide message, encouraging folks to get involved with our campaigns or with these critical moments. You said earlier, and you can imagine how many emails Google employees get every single day. And so the fact that, we're able to take up one little piece of that real estate, it means we have to also get really creative with how we're doing it and make sure that our messaging comes across in a thoughtful and a meaningful way, that it doesn't feel like just another email and that it's not spam. And so we have a pretty robust and localized comms plan for all of our global campaigns and typically do so for crisis response and disaster relief as well. But it really does become important to structure those comms in a meaningful way. And once we send out our global messages, we can then lean on, again, that network of 20%ers.
Wow, it's 20%ers. I want to have them. Yeah.
No, they're amazing. And they then can take those global messages and cascade them out to
and they have their networks.
Exactly.
Sure. So I'm going to really put you on the spot. What are the couple ways that you either put a subject line in that breaks through with the hundreds and hundreds of emails that your colleagues get daily?
Being as short and direct as possible, I think we have seen a lot of success with that. But I also think, just candidly speaking, the email sender also has holds a lot of power, and so we're really lucky that We've had our CEO Sundar send out a couple of, these messages announcing our global campaigns, or sharing ways that Googlers can get involved. And I think pretty likely that when you see an email in your inbox from
the CEO,
or from other senior leaders that you know and look up to and respect, I think that is a really good way to encourage folks to get involved, and frankly, setting the example too. This stuff is important to our leadership, and so I think that the sender, I'd say, almost has a little bit more weight.
Okay, power. Okay,
in the second line. Yep.
What was a big mishit that you had?
Honestly, I think what we experienced last year with our virtual volunteering, I was not prepared for. And I think a lot of folks in the industry were not adequately prepared for the challenges that would arise with virtual volunteering. It's pretty easy to spin up a giving campaign, and giving money it's transactional and virtual by nature. So nothing really changed last year as it related to our giving campaigns. But, it's fairly easy to, organize a group of 100 Googlers even to go out and do a beach cleanup, or, paint at a school or things like that, or even provide career fairs at scale. We have the tools and the resources at our fingertips to be able to scale out in-person volunteering in really impactful and meaningful ways. And it just did not translate in a virtual setting in the same way. And I think the other challenge that we ran into is just the fact that nonprofits, at the start of the pandemic at least, weren't even really in a place where they could absorb a lot of volunteers. And so, we had a lot of Googlers that were like, I want to do this, I want to volunteer, but there wasn't necessarily the capacity on the organization side to absorb them. And so I think, really pivoting a lot of our volunteering campaigns to virtual, and, encouraging Googlers to get involved in ways that they could. I think that was something that I certainly wasn't prepared for. But I will say, I'm proud of the way that we sort of learned from it. And this year we've been able to, it's still challenging. We're still not seeing the same numbers that we would if we were, volunteering in person, let's say, but we really have been able to scale up some of our virtual volunteering offerings. And now we have teams that can virtually volunteer together, and we were able to learn from a lot of that as well. But it was really challenging, especially just given the fact that so many folks really wanted to help and volunteer their time, but it was just really hard to facilitate that type of volunteering. Yeah.
So make our listeners jealous. In a non-pandemic year, how many hours do your colleagues put in to volunteer?
Over 300,000. I think in 2019, it was just under 400,000 hours of volunteering. And actually, I will say, the one interesting thing about last year, we saw our number of unique volunteers went down drastically, and was not, what we typically see in a given year in terms of the number of Googlers who participated. I think we had around 8,000 Googlers volunteer their time last year in 2020. But those 8,000 Googlers volunteered over 200,000 hours. So we didn't really see as much of a drop off in the hours that folks were contributing, which was surprising given we had fewer folks that were volunteering. So I will say, even though last year was challenging in a lot of ways, Googlers still managed to show up and show up for their community in a big way.
Those are your super volunteers.
Exactly.
You get a lot of emails, I'm sure, from your colleagues who are so excited, whether it's a 6-month or 20% or whatever. What's one or two that you got that just blew you away?
I think the stories that I really love hearing about the folks that get involved in our work, or that are interested in getting involved in our work, are really about the connections that Googlers make with each other. So I think one of my favorite stories, a couple years ago, someone forwarded me an email saying that they met their new manager at a Google Serve project. And so they had signed up for a Google Serve project with a bunch of Googlers from across the company working in various departments and teams. And this particular person was in the middle of looking for a new role at the company, and really wanted to try something completely different, and had just started their job search, is volunteering alongside Googlers from across the company and meets a manager who has an open role on their team, is hiring for folks. This Googler ended up interviewing and ultimately getting the job. And that first connection started from one of our Google Serve projects. And so I think I loved that story. I loved getting that email, and just another example of how the work that we're doing goes beyond the impact in the communities and really touches upon that connectiveness and the culture of community that I think is felt by so many Googlers.
So what's next, if you can share with us, for you when we're coming out of the pandemic? We're going into the new normal. So can you share any of your plans with our listeners?
I will say we're really excited to gear up for our annual holiday giving campaign. That is our moment where we encourage Googlers to give back in a global way, and we actually provide every Googler with a credit that they can use Google's money to direct towards any cause or organization that they care about. And then they're encouraged to keep giving. And during this campaign, their donations are not only matched by Google, but they're also matched by peers who raise their hand to say, you know what, I personally love this organization. I'm personally going to match your donation, creating 3 times the impact. So that's actually I think that is probably my favorite time of the year to be a Googler. I love hearing the personal stories and the connections. And so I'm really excited to get involved and launch that campaign in the coming months. But I think the other thing that I'm really looking forward to, we offer a team volunteering program where teams can essentially request a volunteering opportunity for their team in lieu of a traditional team building opportunity, if you will. And I'm anticipating that as we all, or as a lot of us, I should say, return to office and start being able to do things in person, I think that we're going to see a real uptick in a lot of those team requests and folks really wanting to volunteer with each other in person, not across the computer screen. And so I'm excited to be able to spin that program back up again and get folks out in their communities volunteering together.
So it sounds like instead of the Christmas party, that it's going to be the volunteering outing.
Absolutely.
And it'll make people have fun together, but they're also going to leave with some great psychic energy and a very full heart. So that's great. I know the not-for-profits who are listening to this would absolutely kick me in the shins if I didn't say, because you support thousands of not-for-profits. How do they get on your radar so they might be a preferred Googler engaged not-for-profit?
It's a great question. And I think one of the benefits that comes from Google being such a giant company and, having a footprint all around the world in various offices, it's probably likely that someone or a friend of a friend who knows a Googler. And I think really the best way is to leverage that like peer-to-peer context. I mean, you've heard how powerful our 20%ers are and all of the ideas that have come from grassroots Googler efforts. And so I think, really leveraging personal connections and folks that who work at the company to figure out if there's an opportunity and how we might be able to help that particular organization.
So Megan Wheeler, I think that, Global Project Manager at Google.org, I think you need a bigger title, like Global Engagement Evangelist or Chief Evangelist Officer. How do you like that? That gives you a CEO title. You can borrow that one day. So thank you so much, Megan. It's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation filled with so many insights. I think everyone listening is going to be as jealous as heck because of you were smart in your career. You just pivoted when you were young. You hanged in there when you joined as not the job you wanted, but you got the job that you want and love, and you're doing a great job. Listeners, if you like this show, please go to where you listen to your podcasts and please give us some stars so that more people will listen to this show. And we're also looking for feedback and for other organizations and individuals to interview, so please let us know. Thank you so much, Megan Wheeler. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Carol. I really appreciate you inviting me here, and I'm really excited for all of your listeners to join in.
and they can reach you, should they do it via LinkedIn? Because now I'm going to send you thousands and hundreds. Yes, LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
There you go. Okay, great. Well, thanks for your time. It has been great. And now every single time, every single day that I use Google in so many ways, I will always think of you and the great work the company is doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it.
And then the most important thing for anyone listening is please have a great answer to the question, how do you power your purpose?